Thanks for tuning in. My name's Andre Servin, and you're listening to Off the Roost Podcast, brought to you by Off the Roost Custom Calls, turkey calls for the serious hunter. Join me and my co-host, Paul Murdahl, as we delve into the world of the wild turkey, covering everything from calling tips and tactics and hunting strategies to the latest equipment available, featuring interviews from special guests and custom call giveaways. We'll do our best to keep you up to date on this obsession we call turkey hunting. We appreciate you joining us. Now let's get on with the show. Hey, welcome back. You're listening to the Off the Roost Podcast, and this is episode 8. As always, I'm here with my buddy Paul. Paul, how's it going?
It's going wonderful. We got some couple things to get going here today.
We do. We have, and it is all call related, and we are having the cutoff.
Yep.
The great cutoff of 2024.
Right, and we got a great guest coming up too.
Oh yeah, and just in time.
Richard Martinez. Yep, just in time.
Right. Yep, just in time, and he is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to hunting Osceolas, which is a great episode. He's gonna break down all that stuff, but he's gets into detail about a lot of stuff. What to do when they aren't talking, which is a thing those birds like to do, from what I gather. Yep. I've never personally hunted the Osceolas. It is on my list, as I imagine it's on most people's lists. But, you could read any old magazine article or article online about how those birds don't like talking. And we're referring to predominantly public land Osceolas, because that's what Richard hunts, is public land.
He gets, it's not, he gets into a lot of the lay of the land too, what you could expect down there. Not so much just with the birds. He gets quite a bit into the topography and how it works down there.
Yeah, very good. As I imagine, for him to kind of pick up on all these things, I'm going to have to say he's probably a good woodsman to notice all of those things,
Right.
And then, like he was saying, there's times those birds will only gobble. He'll only hear one gobble, and then he's got to go off, sign and all that stuff. And that's all woodsmanship right there for a guy to keep the hunt going when you've only had one gobble like that.
Right.
So,
what do you think? Get the call giveaway out of the way now?
Yeah, dude, go ahead and let it rip.
All right, man. So if y'all haven't heard yet, we've got the custom call giveaway. I'm going to be giving away one of 2 calls that I made here. I got a walnut and a walnut catalpa call here, and the winner of the giveaway gets to choose which one he wants. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask a question here, and we're going to ask that question right now, right?
We are.
So the question is, it's something, who did we get to play the guitar in the intro music to our episodes? And that question has already been answered, and we'll probably add it again here in the future at some point. But you'll have to listen to the past episodes if you want to get that answer. And then when you figure out who played the guitar in the intro, then you'll email us at, what's that email, Andre?
offtheroostpodcast@gmail.com. And not only listening to the prior episodes, in specific, we get into detail about it in episode 4, I believe.
Wow, just giving it away.
Oh, was I not supposed to do that?
All right, so
all right.
Well, when you get the answer,
it's not episode 4. I don't know what episode it is.
I don't know what episode it is either. I just know it's back there.
All right.
So what you're going to do is, when you get the answer to that question, you're going to email us at that email offtheroost@gmail.com.
No, Off the Roost Podcast at gmail.com.
offtheroost@gmail.com.
Yep.
And in the subject or title line, just put in call giveaway. So then we can screen our emails easier that way. And then the entry, we need to receive your entry by March 1st at 11:59 p.m. So 11 at midnight, the entries will no longer be accepted. So when that'll give us time to go through our thousands and thousands of emails and send back numbers.
Yes. And for shipping purposes, we're sorry, but we are going to be restricting this to the 49 states.
Lower 48.
Lower 48. I'm sorry.
Yep. The
Lower 48. Yep.
No Alaska and no Hawaii.
And I did see there are some listeners in other countries, and we're sorry. We're going to have to stick with the U.S. again for the same reasons. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then what else? Subject, call giveaway. Entry must be received by the 1st of April at 11:59.
I thought it was 1st of March.
Or 1st of March at 11:59. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then anything else you could think of?
No, it just oh, well, if you guys are interested and you guys want to get a little bit more details on these calls, if you check out our Instagram page, Off the Roost Calls, or Paul's page, Cooley Creek Custom Calls, and TikTok Off the Roost Pod, there are some little sample videos of Paul kind of displaying these calls, so that way you guys can kind of take a look at them and kind of hear them one-on-one and kind of see which one it is that you want to pick if you are the selected winner.
Yep. And what I'll say here is when we get your correct email with call giveaway and the title and the correct answer, we'll send you back a number from 1 to however entries we have. We'll send you a number that corresponds with your email. That'll be your number. And then when it comes time to do the drawing here on March 1st, or it'll be Wednesday, we'll be releasing it. So when we do that drawing on Wednesday, we'll do a Google number generator, and it'll generate a number for us. And the email that has the number that matches the number generated by Google will have their choice of one of these two calls here. And I will be here by this weekend. By the end of this weekend, I'll be putting up some YouTube videos here, talking a little bit more about these calls and showing them and playing them a little bit more for you.
Nice. I like that.
Right.
Cool. So, I guess
we got the cutoff.
We do. So if you guys remember in maybe a couple episodes ago, and Paul's mentioned it every episode, we were going to have a little bit of a calling contest here. We're doing a cackle, right? I think it's a cackle.
Yeah, we're going to do the fly down cackle.
A fly down cackle. And I guess we're going to have you guys decide who you guys think the winner is, right? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to get involved, they can email us and tell us who they think the winner is. But the reason I was kind of getting into this is, for fly down cackle, I mean, is it a call that you use?
This is a call that I just made.
Not the call that you're using, the actual fly down cackle. Do you use it when you're hunting at all?
Do I actually?
And if you do, what type of circumstance would you use it in?
I would say I must have used a cackle, fly down cackle, maybe a couple times, and it's out of desperation when one of two reasons. He either pitched down with a hen, and it's this like last move of desperation,
right?
Or
so you'll be using it when he's already on the ground then.
Yes, or if he pitches down and he's going in the opposite direction, and maybe I've been quiet the whole morning, maybe then I'll do it in hopes to turn him around.
So you'd just be doing just like a general cackle, then it wouldn't be considered a fly down cackle.
Yeah, I try to maybe
A ground cackle or something.
Yeah, I guess so, but I try to maybe paint it a little bit better than that. And then I think I have used it in the instance where the bird. No, that's about it. I was going to say maybe in an instance where the bird's not flying down yet, and I'm trying to convince him, like, oh, hey, a hen just flew down.
Right. I used to use it similar to what you use. I used to use it for locating a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked like a charm, but all the time, most of the times when I called again, the turkey would be farther away, 200 yards away, and then he'd be farther away. So I'm thinking with all my cackling that I was doing, I was getting the hens aggravated that were with him.
Mm-hmm.
So when I cackle, he'd gobble to me, and she'd be like, hen would go, what's going on here? And she'd lead them away, and the next time I hear them, they'd be twice as far away as when the original gobble was. So I don't cackle so much anymore as a ground type of deal as locating, but I will cackle, and I'll do it while they're still on the roost, and I'll use it if I need them to clear a barrier. Say, like, I want to get them to this side of the creek or this side of the fence line on the property line.
Yeah.
And I'll hit him with a cackle, if I need him to try to get on this side of the barrier, or if I'm real far away, and I'll hit him with a cackle because, he really can't tell that you're not in a tree from, 300 yards away. And I need him to think that there's something going on over there that he needs to come check out, and I need him to hear it. So I'll generally hit a cackle if I'm set up and he's 200-300 yards away from me, then I'll throw a cackle on.
That reminds me, there was one time I used a cackle. There was a tom that was still roosted, and I was heading to that ridge point that the tom was on. I wasn't aware that there was actually already some hens on the ground on the ridge top, and they were just kind of pecking and stuff. And I ended up bumping one of the hens. The hen did not cackle. She did alarm putt like a couple times and then just flew away. And then so I just, pop, 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 just kind of made it sound like, oh, I don't know, I guess like they spooked each other. They bumped into each other, and one of them left, but one of the hens is still there, and that's the one that was cackling. But the tom went quiet after that, and it was over.
Sure.
My opinion is I actually think he ended up staying in the tree maybe an hour after that. Because I think I later bumped him unknowingly.
No confirmation on that, though?
I can't confirm it, no. But I know he went quiet.
Seeing as I gave the challenge, you'll get the option to who starts this show.
Okay, so you know what I was thinking? Rock, paper, scissors.
All right. Rock, paper, scissors.
We're only doing it once.
All right.
All right, ready? Rock, paper, scissors. We were both scissors.
Both scissors?
Yeah. All right, here we go again. Rock, paper, scissors.
You win.
All right, so I guess I'll go first then.
All right, you go first.
Is this a fly down cackle?
Fly down cackle. You can, little baby yelps and some clucks working into it if you want, and then hit us with the cackle.
Just to make it roll a little bit easier. Am I allowed to stand up? Can I stand up?
You could do whatever you want, brother.
Right. I don't want to be right up on the mic either.
Right.
All right. I got to pretend like I'm at Grand Nationals, though, so I got to drink some water. Oh, speaking of, that's going on right now, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be going on on Wednesday or Thursday.
Thursday.
We'll make it out there one day, people. I just couldn't make it happen this year. All right. Do I get a warm-up or just one and done?
You can do two.
All right. All right. That was one. I'm gonna
All
go
right.
one more time.
All right.
All right.
Ooh, coming all the way down that hillside.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The second one a little better. You had a little more rasp in it.
yeah.
All right. So I'm going to ask you which cackle do you want? You want the juvenile? You want the intermediate, or do you want the old hen?
Oh, first of all, I appreciate the options. Always, always, I got to go with the old hen.
The old hen. All right.
Yep. That was really good.
That one kind of got up into the intermediate hen a little bit.
Okay.
So we'll throw one more old hen in there. Just do a quick one. Almost on the Jake level.
All right. Nice. So those were, I'm going to have to say, these are some hill country pitching off the tree onto the ridge tops kind of cackles.
Yep, not real far.
All right. Well, that second one I did, I'm going to have to say was Big Woods Pines.
Right down the ridge, out into the valley,
down in the bottom.
All right, I'm gonna give you my juvenile hen here real quick.
All right.
And I'll throw a little bit into this one. This one's gonna have a little farther to go.
I like that. That was good. I think you're the winner, dude.
You think so?
Yeah.
That's all right. You're gonna get me on the soft stuff.
Oh, I don't know about that. All right, man. Cool. Well, so I think with all of that, man, you think it's about time we dive into the episode and give people all this awesome South Florida Osceola turkey hunting knowledge.
You bet.
Yep.
We covered everything we need to.
So let's talk about some turkey hunting. But all right, cool. So with that said, let's get to it.
You bet.
We're here with Richard Martinez, and Richard Martinez is a great turkey hunter that I found out about through a meat eater episode, and they did a South Florida public land turkey hunt, and Richard seemed to kind of be the guide, kind of the navigating guide through that hunt. So we are here with Richard now. So Richard, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, man?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it. About myself, I live in Florida, South Florida. I live in Jupiter, but I hunt all over South Florida. I'd say mostly public land. I'd probably hunt like 90% of my hunting is public land. I've been hunting. I've only been hunting for about 10 years now. Grew up mostly fishing, didn't really hunt much. Hunted a little bit with my uncles on my mom's side. They hunted, and they kind of exposed it to me when I was a kid, and it always kind of like stuck in the back of my head. I always kind of thought about, oh man, I'd love to get into that one day. And then finally, when I was done with college and all that, I kind of had time on my hands, and I had my weekends available, and I just decided to kind of go out there and just try and figure it out, and see what I could come up with. And I was very fortunate to have some success early on, and kind of like caught into a groove of it, and it just kind of like felt natural. And I've just been going bonkers ever since. I deer hunt, I hog hunt, small game hunt, but turkey hunting is really my passion, my big passion. I always think about that as like the Super Bowl of the year in terms of the hunting season. Like the rest, I'm just doing it because it's the season that's open and it's what's out there and what's that time of year. But I feel like I'm thinking about turkey season all year long, and when it comes up, it like I said, it really feels like the Super Bowl to me.
Right.
So.
What I think I always say is there's turkey hunting season, and the rest is just passing time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I love deer hunting, but I have the same thing every year. It's like I get really excited about deer hunting, and I get really pumped leading up to it and scouting it. And then, those first couple weeks, I'm like, yeah, it's deer season. And then it's just like, man, I'm so tired of sitting in a tree. It's just, I want to run. I want a gun, and that's what I love about turkey hunting, is just being mobile and just, picking a different spot, trying a different area, just moving around, covering as much ground as possible. Yeah. And that for me is what's so exciting about it.
So now, Richard, you say 10 years ago, is that when you started turkey hunting, or is that when you just started hunting in general?
Both. Yeah. I started out, I would say turkey was the first thing I went after. And then turkey season ended, and then I was like, all right, now what? Now I'm going to figure out deer. And, I just to the next season, to the next season, to the next season. And it just, now I just take advantage of each season as they come along.
So it looks like you do a little snipe hunting too.
Oh yeah. That's I call that my second favorite bird. We've got some really great snipe hunting opportunity down here. It's right around this time of year as the water levels are starting to fall. We see them move into areas and it's just real fun hunting. It's real, I'd say it's upland hunting's biggest kept secret, or best kept secret.
Now, are you hunting them with a dog, or are you hunting them like ducks, where you're waiting for them to fly by, or you just wandering?
Just walking.
Just walking.
Yeah, I'll just pick a big area that the water level's right, or it just seems like the right habitat for them, and I'll just walk. I'll do zigzags, walk back and forth, and just kick them up. And then here, the biggest challenge with the tall grass we have is then finding them, because you've really got to. Like I said, it's not with a dog, so I'm just walking by myself, and you'll hit them, and then you'll just have to follow them with your eye, and you'll have to literally pick a blade of grass that you saw them hit on their way down, and just keep your eyes on it and walk straight at that blade of grass till you find it. Meanwhile, as you're walking, other ones are flushing, and you have to try as hard as you can not to look at them, because the minute you turn away and look back, it's like you just lost that blade of grass, and you'll never find them. And it's like dropping a camo glove in 3 feet of grass. It's just it's gone. Yeah.
Right.
That's how I am with gobblers, man. Like whenever I spot one, I learned if I take my eyes off of that bird when I'm moving around or something, he's gone. Like I won't be able to find him again. And this is mainly like when I see one on a field edge, and I'm trying to skirt through the woods to get closer. I know it's a gamble, because the second I take my eyes off of him, he's going to vanish. I'm not going to know where he went. And normally I end up making a mistake out of frustration at that point. But I was going to ask, so what is it in particular that kind of pushed you into the turkey camp? You know, we all got our reasons, and some of them are pretty similar, but I'm just kind of curious to hear what kind of pushed you into that camp.
Yeah, it's as I mentioned, it's you know, the running and gunning is really important to me. Just being mobile, being on my feet, moving around a lot, but also the game itself, right? The you know, the checks back and forth between turkey's calling, turkey's moving, are you moving, am I moving, should I move, should I stay, like all those sort of decisions, the whole psychology of it, really, because when it comes to deer hunting, it's really about patterning them. You pattern them, you understand their behavior, and then you sit and wait, or you try and be where you think they're going to be. But turkey's a little more complicated. It's not only patterning, which is very important. Don't get me wrong, but then it's trying to fool them, right? Because for instance, we have to bring them into closer range. So that's a game in itself, a challenge in itself. And then you've got an animal who's very wary, spooks very easily, and sometimes acts exactly as you think it will, or is very predictable. And sometimes it's completely not predictable. Sometimes a turkey will just decide that he's going to gobble at every single one of your calls, but every single time he's going to get a little further away. And you're going to call again, and he'll gobble back at you, but he'll just continue to walk away. He doesn't have hens with him, and you don't understand why he won't come to you. You just don't get it. You can call softly, you can call you can get really aggressive with the calling, and he just doesn't change his behavior. And then you've got another turkey who will do exactly what you want him to, right? You'll call to him, he'll gobble. That you'll call to him again, the next gobble, he's right on top of you. And it's that unpredictability, I think, that draws me to it as well.
Yeah, no, those are all good reasons. Yeah.
So now,
it sounds like heavy on the chess match, you know?
Have you been in Florida for most of your life then? It's something you've been around. So you've been around, you've heard the turkey hunting, and I'm sure you've seen them around, whatever you're driving around. What actually triggered you to actually start hunting them? Was it just
my background was mostly like hiking and camping. Like I'd always been engaged in the outdoors, but I always felt like, even since I was exposed to hunting through my uncles as a kid, like I always felt like hunting was the next level. It was not like, when you think about hiking and camping, there's almost like a voyeuristic like version of your relationship with nature. You're just looking at it. But hunting felt like you were immersing yourself in it. Like you're not playing a game anymore. Like this is for food. Like you're doing this thing and you're going to eat it afterwards. So
yeah, for sure.
It just became so much more immersive. So
and I would imagine it probably draws on your predatory instincts from
Absolutely. I mean, there's just things that light up in your brain that just don't get lit up sitting at work reading emails, you know?
Right.
Oh yeah.
So that was huge for me. I mean, that was a seed that, like I said, it was kind of planted by my uncles when I was a kid, and it was just always there in the back of my head, just like kind of calling me. And then, one day I just decided, let me try and figure this out, and just went for it, and just scouted as much as I possibly could, just covered as much ground as I possibly could, and then just kind of started putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
Sure.
Let me ask you this, man. So you got a guy, you as an example, but it's like, you're going to try doing this. I imagine nobody's there kind of really teaching you or mentoring you through it. And then the public land option that you have available is the Florida swamps, arguably some of the most intimidating terrain that a hunter can face. How was that, man?
Yeah, that was tough, but it was also very formative. And a lot of people will hit me up, for example, on Instagram, and just kind of trying to pick my brain for pointers, and new hunters just trying to get into it and figure it out and get their feet wet. And that's literally the only way I think you can figure it out. And literally in Florida, get your feet wet.
Yeah.
Right.
Just really immersing yourself in time spent in the woods. It's really the only way you can kind of pick up on the pulse of the woods. I read a bunch of turkey books when I was trying to figure it out. And as you can imagine, a lot of those writers were people who were hunting the Ozarks, and people were hunting in the South, the southern states, as in Alabama, Georgia,
Yep.
And none of it was Florida. So the knowledge there was a basic philosophy of turkey hunting there. But none of it could really speak to the terrain. None of it was very specific that I could take and really understand what I was looking at here in the Everglades. So it was really important just to completely immerse myself and just spend as much time as I possibly could, and just scout absolutely as much as I possibly could, and just cover as much ground as possible, and just walking, and then finding areas with lots of tracks, dropping a pin, walking, finding other areas, and then triangulating those areas where you found lots of tracks, and then getting there before the sun comes up and listening, finding good spots, triangulated spots where you're making the most of your time in the morning by being in what you think might be the heart of their area, their core habitat area,
Yeah.
And getting in there early and listening for gobbles. And I feel like that's the only way you can really put things together, put the pieces of the puzzle together, is just that really, 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 really immersing yourself with putting boots on the ground. So
Right.
it gets kind of cliche, but people ask me, what? It's just like, you got to scout. You
Right.
really got to scout. You really got to spend a lot of time there, and especially as you get close to turkey season, and especially as the breeding season kicks up and fires up. When you spend a lot of time around the birds, like you also get a sense of what you can get away with and what you can't get away with. So you can kind of track birds that are gobbling, figure out where they landed, figure out where their strut zones are, and kind of like creep in, see their strut areas, watch them for an hour, and sometimes you'll bump them, and then sometimes you won't, and you just kind of like adapt to their pulse, or adapt to the threshold to which you can get away with, so that by hunting season you feel confident in what you can and cannot get away with.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
I mean, it's just, you're getting experience, whether you're hunting them or not. You're getting experience, and that's just going to make you a better hunter. I mean, as you go on. You and Andre had touched on the habitat here a little bit ago, and I'm not whatsoever familiar with Florida. The closest I've been to Florida would be North Georgia. So I mean, I get it. It's the Everglades swamps, but what are we looking at? I mean, from what I understand, it's like elevation changes of like a foot are massive. Are you looking,
Absolutely.
Are you kind of an all? You got pines? You got hardwoods? Or is it like a palmetto? Or you got logging activity going on there? I mean, do you have to worry about tides? In the Everglades, as far as water rising and lowering through the day? I mean, what are we looking at?
Yeah. So water is a huge factor, as you can imagine, in Florida. We have a very wet season and we have a very dry season. So, meaning they're very extreme. Our wet season peaks around September, and our dry season peaks around probably like May. That's probably the driest time of the year. So areas that could be under a foot of water in September could be absolutely bone dry, or even more, even 2 feet of water could be absolutely bone dry come by May, even by turkey season. Because once the water levels start to fall, they fall pretty fast, which really begins like around February. They really just start dropping quickly. So that means that it's also tricky to think about where turkeys are at different times of the year. They have no problems walking through water, but as you can imagine, they gravitate towards drier areas. And it's also tricky to think about, like I've hunted other states, and I've found that turkeys are typically near water. That's where you can find them. Here, there's water everywhere. So that's not something that you really think about unless it's in an extreme dry conditions. And we do get that every once in a while, every few years during our dry season, that we'll be able to anticipate that those birds will be in the swamp. So as you mentioned, habitat types do change within a foot of elevation changes. So we're a very flat place. Florida's very flat, especially South Florida. We don't have a lot of elevation, but we do have a lot of habitat type that depends on the elevation based on the water levels. So how it's based on their hydro periods, how long or how many months out of the year those areas are underwater. So areas that are underwater for most of the year, certain types of plants and certain types of ecology flourish, like cypress, like a swamp, like a cypress swamp, as you would imagine your traditional swamp to look like. Other areas flourish, and this might not be the right ratio. So I'm just throwing this out an example. Like maybe 50% of the year they can be inundated with water, but the other 50% they can't. You know, that could determine if it's a pine island. Just for example, a hardwood hammock basically is our highest elevation and is typically out of water all year long. It'll go underwater, like if we have like a flood event, like a hurricane or a tropical storm, a hammock could go underwater, but typically those stay dry all year long. And interestingly, there was a study recently, a few years ago, called the South Florida Deer Study, and they had collared some deer, and they were fortunate enough to get a hurricane within their the study period, and were able to track the behavior of the deer during the hurricane. And prior to the storm's arrival, they could actually see deer gravitating towards the hammocks, knowing somehow, maybe through pressure, the pressure dropping, that this rain was coming, and this high water event was on its way, because they actually have the tracking data showing them going towards these hardwood hammock areas that were typically always dry. So a hammock is a great place to find turkeys in if the understory is relatively open. Because there's also another, as important as water is to our habitat and our ecology, so is fire. And if things have a regular burn rotation, as is like sort of the natural cycle with the amount of thunder, with the amount of lightning we have, things should be burned like on a probably like on a 3-year cycle, which kind of keeps a nice understory, doesn't allow the understory to get very thick and choked out. Turkeys don't like areas that have really thick understories, whereas you can imagine it's really hard to walk through. I'm sure you guys have all heard the saying, if a turkey likes to walk through an area, a person likes to walk through an area, you can kind of predict where turkeys are based on like an ease of mobility. They're thinking about ambush predators all the time, so they kind of want the ability to escape really quick. So fire is an important part of our landscape as well.
So now you were talking understory in the hardwood hammocks.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be palmettos, or is that going to be just like some brush or something like that?
So that could be palmettos. Palmettos, like saw palmetto, you can find them in a pine island. You can find them in a hardwood hammock. They're a very, very common, very, very tolerant plant. We also have great big savannas that are just covered in palmettos, big expanses, especially as you get towards the Kissimmee River Valley, and as you move towards Orlando, you'll get huge areas of just nothing but absolute, like a sea of palmettos. But they're pretty common as long as it's not an area that is predominantly wet. If it's kind of like a 50% dry or drier, you'll be sure to find palmettos.
So in the wetter areas, then it's going to be like a swamp grass or something.
Yeah, you're either going to have a marsh or you're going to have a swamp. So a marsh, we have a lot of different grasses, sawgrass, for example, muley grass, different types of grasses that we'll typically refer to them as prairies. And then if it's dominated by cypress, then you would refer to it as a swamp. And then if you're looking on satellite, there's different formations of swamps. So you may hear someone describe something as a cypress dome or a cypress strand. A strand would be almost like a linear formation. If you're looking at it on satellite, it'll almost look like the closest thing we have would be like a river. And it's just like a long depression that the cypress trees have colonized, that the water is flowing, but it's almost imperceptible because it's moving so slow. A dome is more, if you're looking on satellite, like a round shape you'll see. And it's the same thing, but it's like a depression, almost like a bowl in the elevation cut out where the cypress trees have colonized and kind of dominate. So you'll see two things. You'll see bowls that are dominated by cypress trees, which we'll refer to as a cypress dome, or you'll see a bowl that's dominated by grasses, and we'll call those prairies.
All right. Those areas are generally pretty big.
They vary. They can be 50 yards across. They can be 500 yards across.
Sure.
So it depends kind of on the water levels. Like there's a lot of different factors that kind of determine which way what habitat swings. But you'll look at some areas and it'll be a completely like polka dotted. Like if you'll look at satellite, you'll just see all different circles. You'll see lots of different circles and circles and circles. And then you'll get there and it'll be like one circle's a pine island and one circle's a prairie and one circle's a cypress dome. And then other areas will be large expanses of pines with smaller prairies kind of stuck in between the pines. And then other areas will be giant swamps with lots of cypress trees with just little islands of pines in between them. So it all kind of varies depending, again, on the water levels, what the water does, and the elevation.
Cool. Just getting back to what you were saying about turkeys, they don't have a problem with walking through the water. So if you're set up or trying to set up on a gobbling Osceola there, and you got the swamp in front of you. You got the water between you and him. But if he goes around, out of the way to the right, a couple 100 yards, he'll stay dry land. Do you see that they'll generally stick to the dry land, or will they come right through the water to you?
Both. So they'll typically cruise the edges. Like for example, if we were set up on a cypress dome, typically the center of the dome is going to be the deepest spot. So unless the water level is very low, chances are he's probably going to walk the edge of it. And both the deer and the turkey really love those edge habitats. Like you'll find a lot of game trails, you'll find a lot of buck rubs right on that transition zone between a cypress dome and a prairie. For whatever reason, they just love cruising that edge. And so the turkeys typically, I find, will also do the same. But again, if the water level is just right, a turkey will also walk straight through it and right at you. So I actually once had a turkey. I was set up with a dome in front of me, and there was like this beautiful lane that went all the way around the dome, and he was roosted up along that lane. And of course, I expected him to walk down that lane, and I'm pointing the gun and I'm calling him, and he's gobbling back, and he goes quiet for a little bit. And then all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, pow, he hits me, and he's in the dome, like right in the middle. He just, instead of coming down the lane, he just did an arc into the dome for whatever reason. And again, going back to sometimes turkeys read the script and sometimes they just do whatever they want. Fortunately, I had enough brush in front on my right side that I could pivot and turn around, and 30 seconds or a minute later, he stepped out of that dome and I shot him, but surprised me by actually walking straight through the dome instead of the lane that I would have expected him to walk through.
Sure. Up in northern Minnesota where I hunt, I mean, you think of it as big woods, but it's, as far as the way the habitat's broken up, it's similar to what you're going through. But it would be like a bog swamp.
Mm-hmm.
So you got these big expanses of bog swamps with little islands of maybe some hardwoods or some aspens or something scattered around them. And when I first started hunting up there, I was like, I didn't like walking through them bog swamps, and I was almost 100% positive the turkeys weren't going to walk through it, but I learned real quick that that's not the case.
Yeah. Again, that goes back to, the unpredictability. And I think that's what keeps me on my toes when it comes to turkey hunting, and just keeps me so engaged with it, is that if they did exactly what you thought they do all the time, you'd just get over it after a few seasons, I think.
Okay. Granted, they weren't hanging out in the middle of the bog swamp, but they had no problems crossing them wherever they needed to.
Yeah, totally.
Do you think you could call one across a bog swamp?
Across the bog swamp? I don't think so.
Like, maybe it needs to cross like 30 yards to get to you.
I would think it would probably hang up on the other side and wait for you to make the next move. I've tried it a few times and it hasn't worked for me, so I can't say that you can or can't, but I haven't.
When do they cross them?
Well, they'll go around to high spots or something like that.
Oh.
Or they'll wait for you to show up. I mean, if you get on one and he's in an island out in the middle of the bog or whatever, chances are I probably wouldn't have been hunting there to begin with, just because it would be so difficult.
Mm-hmm. Richard, I was wondering, and I heard you mention other states. So you hunted Florida. Where else have you hunted?
I've hunted Georgia, North Carolina, and Nebraska.
Okay. And then I think you met the meat eater dudes in like Idaho. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was. I don't know if you guys are familiar with backcountry hunters and anglers, but yeah, I'm involved with them. I started a chapter here in Florida, and they do a convention every year. And the meat eater guys were there. They did like a live podcast at one of these conventions, and I had the opportunity to meet Steve and Yanni, and we got to talking about turkeys, and Steve had mentioned that he'd been interested in coming down there, and he asked for my number. I said, sure, here you go. And I didn't expect him really to call me. But a few months later, they did call me. And yeah, we started at that time when they had actually called me was during the open period to put in for our quota draw system. And I had suggested to them, hey, if you guys want a really great hunt, you should start building points. And they thought that was a good idea. And they started putting in and then finally drew a permit.
Nice. Have you ever gone like hunting in Florida on public, not on a quota hunt, but like just general open?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd say most of my hunting is without a quota, so it's less likely that I have a quota.
Yeah.
As our population numbers grow here in Florida, so do the opportunities and the difficulty to obtain a permit becomes harder and harder. So those opportunities usually takes for a good permit. You're probably looking at every 3 to 4 years, like a really solid good permit. There are some hunts that are sub quota hunts that you can definitely draw with 2. Some of them even 1 point, but yeah, it usually takes about 3 to 4 points to draw a solid hunt. So if I had to wait every 3 to 4 years to have a good hunt, I'd be hurting and jonesing pretty bad. So I do a lot of hunting on open, what you would call an over the counter hunt.
Is it pretty busy? Like, is it pretty packed in the general? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's probably, like anywhere, like probably where you guys hunt, it gets slammed opening weekend and then it just kind of goes down from there. So you definitely want to try and get out during the week as opposed to the weekends. That third weekend, that fourth weekend, that's when things really cool off. And then all of a sudden everyone disappears and you don't know, where they all went.
Well, I would imagine about that time, the rest of the states are starting to open their season up.
Yeah, well, that's a pain point for us here in South Florida, is because our season is actually out on an island like that. We open up earlier than anybody else in the country. I think the only other state that opens earlier than us is Hawaii, and there's not a lot of folks who are going to travel to Hawaii to turkey hunt, but Florida's pretty accessible. So, if you want to come hunt opening weekend South Florida, you can come here, hunt that opening weekend, get back home, have 2-3 more weeks to scout, and then be home in time for your opening weekend. So as you can imagine, we get hammered pretty hard that first and second weekend with non-resident hunters.
That's late February that you guys open?
No, it would be March, first weekend March.
But I think it's the youth opens.
Youth is last weekend of February. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I noticed looking over your Instagram page, you seem to tag out pretty early there in your Florida season. So I'd imagine, you're jonesing pretty hard by the time third weekend rolls around. That must be when you're moving off to Georgia and taking some trips somewhere else then. So I've been fortunate over the last few years to tag out pretty early, and it's allowed me to do a little bit of traveling and get into some other opening weekends, like for example, Georgia, North Carolina. So I have been able to travel a little bit. I'm hoping to go to Texas this year. So I'm just putting together a trip now to try and get my Rio, because I've got my Eastern, I've got my Osceola, I've got my Miriam, so the Rio's the missing link. That's kind of what I was getting at, that you must have a little bit of experience with some Easterns and some other subspecies. Yeah. Actually, I had a really hard time with Easterns. It took me 3 years to tag an Eastern finally. So Sure.
I
So
struggled there.
with your experience, are there any traits that you see different between, say, like an Eastern and an Osceola? That you'd
I
be
would say similar traits would be the gobble. I think is more sounds an Eastern gobble and an Osceola gobble sound very similar, whereas a Merriam gobble sounds very different. The only thing I will say is the Osceola gobble sounds a little shorter even than the Eastern gobble. But Eastern is I would say probably pretty loud, just probably based on their body size. But differences would be body size. Our birds are really small compared to an Eastern, compared to a Merriam. I've seen Jakes in Nebraska that were bigger than a full-grown, bearded Osceola down here, especially as you get further southern, like to the southern tip of Florida. The birds get smaller and smaller and smaller as you go.
Sure. How about as far as their habits and stuff like that? How they go about their business during the day. Do you find any similarities or something you could pick out that would?
Well, Osceolas are kind of notorious for being very quiet compared to the other birds. Whereas in my experience, Merriams were really vocal. I had a ball in Nebraska just based on that alone. We had birds gobbling at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just gobbling their heads off. It was really great to just hear so much gobbling because down here we'll get a bird that gets fired up for sure, and he'll gobble all morning. But it's more often that the birds are quiet just based on how much predator pressure they experience. When we think about pressure, we think that it's hunting season. The birds are getting pressured, but there are so many predators down here. It's hunting season all year for these birds, so they're very, very shy to gobble. We've got bobcats, panthers, bears, coyotes. As you can imagine, there's a lot of things down here that want to eat a turkey. So it's not great for them to gobble too much. So you will often get birds that'll really gobble on the tree. They'll get fired up and they'll be gobble and gobble for a while on the tree, but once they hit the ground, they may gobble once, twice, and that's it. You'll never hear them again for the entire day. But as I mentioned, sometimes a bird will completely surprise you, and he'll just get in a spot where he's comfortable, and he'll just gobble and gobble and gobble and gobble. I've heard birds just gobble for 2 hours, just gobble their head off. But typically, as I said, very quiet bird. Much longer legs than an Eastern or a Merriam's, mostly from walking in the water. Darker bird for sure. You'll see, especially as you get down further south in the state, they get darker and darker, and you'll see the bands on their wings. The bars, the black bars, will break up. They won't be stripes that run completely through the wing. They'll almost be like tiger stripes of white through a black wing.
Sure. Back to the gobbling. You say they don't gobble. You don't think as much as the other turkeys. Do you think that affects their aggressiveness? Do you think they're on par with as far as coming to calling?
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the things that makes them challenging for people is that they think that the bird's not there anymore, or that the bird is gone, or there is no birds here. And that, I think, often people will make mistakes with that. Whereas if you are able to spend the time scouting and spending time with them, they're still there, and they will still be as susceptible to calling as if they were gobbling a lot. So I feel like I can only compare my experience to my Miriam's hunts in Nebraska, where those birds will talk to you the whole way in, right? There'll be a conversation. You can, then you can hear them get further away, and then you can make a decision to move. You hear them get closer, you can get ready. Here, that's probably not going to be the case. Maybe 50% of the time, you're going to have that exchange going back and forth. But most of the time, in my experience, I'm going to hear him gobble. I'm going to hear him gobble. I'm going to hear him hit the ground. They'll gobble once, gobble twice. I'll call to them. If they respond to me and we're like connected, like I know about you, you know about me, chances are they're probably going to come unless I blow it somehow. And how I could possibly blow it, I don't even know. And I won't even know unless I blow it,
Until you do.
It's like I might call too hard and that might spook them. I might try and get up and move another 20 feet closer, and that might spook them. I might not call enough, and that might have them lose interest. So I'll never know. That's the
right
kind of
with that
game
that
you get
lose
into.
interest thought. So, are the hens the same? Do you find they're not very vocal neither, or are they?
It's this, I would say it's the same kind of mix. It's unpredictable. You can get a hen that will like just cackle and go bonkers sometimes. And then other times you won't have any response from them at all.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it really kind of, I don't know, it depends on their temperament, depends on the mood. I find it often depends on the weather. Like if you've got like low pressure, you're really not going to hear a lot of birds. They just really like bright sunny days.
Right. And getting back to the predator pressure you were talking about too, and it makes sense that, with all the predators and whatnot down there, along with humans trying to eat them, that they wouldn't be as vocal. That maybe they have maybe they have certain areas where they feel comfortable sounding off and gobbling from, but in the rest of the spots, it's like, here I am over here, I hear ya. And then he's going to go quiet while he sneaks in, just because of the fact that if he's gobbling all the way to you, he's going to attract predators.
Exactly. Yeah. I would say more often hear him spit and drum when he's close to me than I will him gobbling. So like I said, birds can be totally predictable. So it's also like misleading to get into these ideas that this is the way the bird's going to be. But that being said, most often a bird will gobble 100 yards away, and that'll be his last gobble, and he'll just close the distance silently. And then at that point, I'll most often just hear him spitting and drumming, and that's what'll trigger me. Like for example, a bird I shot this year, he never gobbled. There was one way far off that I could hear. And I was calling to that one, just kind of going at it, kind of being a little aggressive, and he was gobbling back at me, but he was way far, and I could tell it was too far of a distance for him to come to me. But I knew there were a lot of birds crossing through that area where I'd sat down. So I wasn't about to run to that bird. I was just sticking it out in my spot, just based on the confidence I'd had scouting. And sure enough, a bird comes in who'd never gobbled silently. And the only thing I heard before I saw him was the spit. And I was like, where is he? Where is he? And I could just kept hearing the spit. And I was like, where is he? Where is he? And that's the only thing that had me prepared or ready or had the gun up. Because had I not heard that, he would have walked in on my right and I would have gone, oh no, and swung around And in that span of time, probably he would have booked it.
Right. Or he probably would have just picked you off with some movement or something that you were doing because you didn't think he was close.
Yeah.
Well, so I got a question, man. So, like you were saying, sometimes for the most part, they could be kind of tight-lipped. I imagine, for a bird that only gobbles once or twice on the ground, a guy's got to kind of fall back on the scouting he did earlier, right? That's kind of,
Absolutely.
I imagine if I knew the birds in my area were only going to gobble once or twice, I think I'd focus a little bit more on the areas with sign versus, trying to go off the gobbling, So,
yeah. Because that's where you're going to get caught up, is that you're just going to be bumping birds. If you're thinking, where are the birds, let's go find the gobbles, you're going to walk around and you're going to just stomp through birds, and you're never going to see those birds. You won't even know that you spooked birds, especially here in Florida where the vegetation is thick. We're not seeing birds from 200 yards away that we can creep up on. That's a rare occasion. I mean, that can happen, but that's not something that you can a tactic you can rely on. You're probably not going to see that bird till you're within 50 yards of him. But he's going to hear you when you're within 100 yards of him, right? He's going to hear the palmettos. He's going to hear things he doesn't like. And he's not going to wait to find out what it is. He's gone.
Yeah. So I was kind of thinking, from the time that you started to where we're at now, I'm sure you've probably seen an increase in pressure, right? Has it been significant?
Yeah. An increase in pressure, mostly non-resident. Increase. It feels like the pressure is the same more or less from the resident side. And again, as I mentioned, by that third, fourth week, it just drops off. It's gone. As long as those birds can make it through, there's a lot of hunting opportunities still left in that mid to late season.
Right. Mm-hmm. Beck, what are you doing for mosquitoes down there?
Mostly Thermacell, or do a little bit of bug spray, but basically a Thermacell. And I don't like to run it too long because it'll kind of bother me if I've got it on too long. So I'll basically click it on just at first crack of light, and then once the sun's kind of up, I'll turn it off. But right at that dawn dusk, that's when it really gets nasty in terms of mosquitoes. But when it's dark out and when the sun's up, it's tolerable. It's really not bad.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll use mine in the late season. Like if I'm gonna go do some blind calling or something in a setup where I'm gonna be there for a little bit, I'll bring the Thermacell with me. But you're right, I do the same thing where I'll turn it off and on periodically because I'm thinking, it can't be good for you to breathe this stuff in.
No way.
Yeah.
No, I've had them on too long and I've gotten nauseous. So.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's times I didn't get nauseous, but I started getting kind of, I don't know if lightheaded is the word, but I was just kind of ugh. And then I was like, you know what? I'm turning this thing off,
Yeah. No, you don't want to be breathing that too long.
So now if you're setting up your Thermacell, and there's a little bit of a breeze going, are you just keeping it on you, or are you setting it upwind from you?
No, I'm just keeping it in my vest in the back, so it's not too close to my face. So I'll just stick it on the back of me somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And that seems to, if there's a breeze, it's just not blowing, so you get mosquitoes coming from the way the breeze is coming from.
Yeah, that can happen, but I feel like in the mornings particularly is the wind really dies, so it isn't really such a factor.
Sure.
It's more like as the sun comes up, the wind picks up, and then at that point, the mosquitoes aren't too bad.
Mm-hmm. What was it like hanging out with Steve, man?
Good. It was fun. That was a great crew. I was really nervous about having so many people tromping around in the woods. I was pretty freaked out about that. I didn't know how we were going to kill birds with like multiple cameramen and like multiple hunters like walking around as a pod like through the woods. I was really anxious about that. But I was kind of blown away even after our first day. Just the, you know, those camera guys, they hunt. They're very sensitive to their presence, and they really know how to be quiet and vanish.
Yeah.
I was really blown away, and you didn't really get to see this so much in the show because ultimately, in the end, it's like a 20-something minute episode, and there's hours and hours of footage. But with the hunt that when Yanni shot his bird, that was. I think we looked back at the footage and it was 50 minutes from when we found those birds to when he shot. And so that's 2 guys leaning against a tree and 2 camera guys leaning against a tree in a flock of turkeys for 50 minutes. Yeah. I'm talking like 5 yards, some of them walking 5 yards in front of us. And these birds didn't spook. A few of them at some, different points might have given us funny looks, but then just went back to feeding. And it was really remarkable. Like after that experience, I was like, all right, I'm not worried about these guys anymore. Like they're very, very tactful. It's
a good thing. It's a good thing turkeys can't smell.
Oh yeah, no, we would have definitely been in trouble if that were the case. But
yeah, so it sounds like his crew, his camera guys, he gets some good dudes that know.
Oh yeah, no, every single one of those guys are absolute pros at what they do, and really, I mean, that's the only way you can get the kind of footage that he gets and capture that whole experience, right?
Yeah.
Doing a public land hunt, high pressure birds. I mean, just the spookiest animal you can imagine, and getting that type of footage. You can only do it with that type of crew, and just being with those guys. They just love hunting. They love fishing. I mean, like just super passionate about it. It was just a great experience. To be. In turkey camp with that caliber of people who are that passionate about hunting and fishing.
Yeah, for sure. I know you mentioned earlier the backcountry hunters and anglers. I am following that group.
What do they do? What is that organization?
Mostly advocate like public land issues, access issues, habitat issues. I would say mostly around public land, but also a lot of R3 involvement. Just try to get new hunters involved, get youth involved, and exposed to hunting. But yeah, mostly public land based advocacy.
I think I've been prompted by that group to fill out some forms and stuff to send off to politicians and stuff. Like, is that correct? That's kind of what the group kind of does?
Yeah, oftentimes they'll have like action alerts depending on, if there's something that is going to get impacted by your local representatives are going to be voting on something that would impact public lands. Then we'd create action alerts to get you to kind of send a letter to your representatives. Because really, I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's the only way anything gets done in politics is really being the squeaky wheel and having putting pressure on people to vote which way or what have you.
So I imagine, like with most people, like where you live, that's everybody's always kind of their favorite place to hunt. But outside of Florida, from the places you've been to, where do you like? You just can't wait to go back.
Oof. definitely Georgia. I've really had a blast out there the last few years. I'd love to get back out west. I mean, I thought Nebraska was just I just had a ball with, again, I mentioned, but how vocal those birds were. It's just fun to experience that. I remember one morning, and I'm not exaggerating, I probably heard 30 birds gobbling. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, I could just hear, very quiet morning, no wind at all, very hilly landscape. We're up on top of a hill, and we could just hear them in every direction. 3 birds over there, 4 over here, 5 behind, just like every direction we could hear them. And man, that was just such a treat, because you could totally screw up a hunt and just be like, all right, let's just walk a quarter mile that way and start calling again. Like, it was here, I think what makes it so challenging is how much scouting I have to put into it to get results. But it's also very fortunate that I'm able to, because I live here and I can spend my weekends, and I do have areas that are close by to my house, so I can get into the woods in the morning and then make it to work on time, and just get to spots where I can listen. And so that's all important when it comes down to season. But when you get to a place like Nebraska and you just show up and you're just hunting that day, it's certainly a lot more fun to show up and just be in birds, and then just see where that takes you, So I'd probably say I'd love to get out west back to Nebraska. But I think this year, as I mentioned, I'll focus on Texas, try to get my Rio. Hopefully that works out. And then maybe next year, try Nebraska again.
So just going back over what you just said there, I mean, with the Osceolas, no, I just lost my train of thought. What was it? Whatever. It'll come back to me. I got this other one for you. All right. What are you using for footwear in the swamp?
It depends on how hot it is. Most of the time I'm wearing muck boots for the most part. Love them. They seem like, for me, the most comfortable and the most durable. I haven't gone through many of them. So muck boots are kind of my go-to. But if it's very hot, I have wading boots that I wear, and I just kind of succumb to getting my feet wet and just walking through water. And it's also kind of a relief, because sometimes in higher water years, you might want to cross through a swamp, and you don't want to you don't want to fill your muck boots with water. So you might be forced to go around somewhere where it's not the direct line you'd like to take. So with the wading boots, it's a little nicer. You can just be like, I'm going through that swamp and I don't care. I can go through knee deep. It doesn't matter to me. But that's kind of like my difference. Like deer season, I'm in the wading boots the whole season long.
Wading boots? You're talking hip boots then? Or just an ankle, a hip wader?
Yeah, just an ankle, just something. It's got holes in it that just drain, so my feet are just wet.
So it'd be a wading shoe you'd put over like a neoprene sock on a pair of neoprene waders or something.
Exactly. Gotcha. Yeah. Just without the sock.
All right, gotcha. I figured out what I was going to get back to. As far as you were hearing all them turkeys in Nebraska and whatnot. So then I'm guessing you're not seeing that down in Florida, where the densities of the turkeys, they're not, spread out across the landscape. They're going to be in pockets of here, and then 2 miles away, 3 miles away, 5 miles away, you'll find another pocket of birds. Is that?
I think so. Yeah. That's what I found. I find a whole lot of areas, a lot more areas without turkeys than I do with turkeys.
Sure.
So I find most of my scouting is crossing things off the list as opposed to like putting things in the Rolodex.
So it'd be
like it'd be similar
to scratching. Go ahead. It'd be
I
similar.
was saying it's scratching things off my list is what I'm doing more of.
Sure. So it'd be similar to me when I'm hunting big woods in northern Minnesota, where birds are here, and then you might have to go 5-10 miles, to find the next flock. It's
Mhm.
I mean, and there's a lot of, when I first started hunting, there's a lot of hardwoods up there in certain areas, and I was like just chomping at the bit, and I'm running around all these big hardwood forests, and I ain't seeing or hearing any turkeys in it. And it took me a while to figure out, well, in the middle of them hardwoods is probably a good spot for them in the fall, but in the spring they're looking for a little different habitat to hang out in.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, people can get tripped up on that here too. With like I mentioned, with our wet season, dry season, you might be in an area where you deer hunted that year and you saw a whole bunch of turkeys, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna come back here because there's turkeys here, and you show up and those water levels are completely different, and those birds have moved off to somewhere else, and you're like, where did these turkeys go? They were all here during deer season. And same exact thing with the deer. Like I've been in areas during turkey season where I see a whole bunch of deer, and then I come back there during deer season and I can't find any. So, that those water levels will kind of change where they like to be and hang out.
Sure. And then, it just come to me as far as acorns. Do you find the turkeys down there are keen on acorns? I mean, during the springtime, it's got to be fairly warm down there yet, and I'm under the impression that acorns are a high energy food for turkeys, and they shy away from it when the temperatures get warmer because they can't regulate their body temperature. And if they eat, high energy foods like that, they have a tendency to overheat possibly. Do you find, turkeys are a big key? They key in on turkey or on acorns like they do a little further south, where it gets a little cooler in the winter and whatnot?
I find they're more they eat a lot of berries. We've got a lot of berry type plants that bear little fruit, and I find that they're more stick to those types of food rather than acorns. I'm sure they're eating acorns, but our acorns are like falling now, basically. Like now's really our acorns are dropping. So I think by turkey season, they're all either eaten up or, harder to find.
Right.
But
there's probably not the shelf life on them neither as they do in the colder climates during the winter and the fall up here, I would imagine. So they're probably going bad faster too.
Probably. Yeah.
Right.
But I would say, mostly berries. And believe it or not, I've busted a lot of birds out of a sable palm. And a sable palm, also called the cabbage palm, is a taller palm tree and has little dark colored berries, and the turkeys will jump up in them. And I busted a lot of birds out of those trees. They're just up in the crown picking those berries.
Sure.
Well, Richard, I gotta say, you definitely sound like a Florida expert.
One more question for you, Richard: e-bike or no e-bike?
I do have an e-bike. I don't use it really for turkey hunting though. I find that I could be in a spot that I started at that morning that might be 4 miles away from where I began. So then having to get back to the bike could be an issue. So for turkey season specifically, I've shy away from the e-bike. I also have picked up a lot more walking and staring at the ground during turkey season, as opposed to riding fast. You just pick up on a lot more sign if you're just staring at the ground, looking at tracks, looking at scratching, finding strut marks in the sand. But for example, like a small game hunting, I utilize the e-bike a lot. Hog hunting, I'll utilize the e-bike a lot. We've got a lot of fire breaks down here that are perfect for getting down, 2 miles pretty quick on an e-bike. So yeah, not for turkey hunting, but for other seasons, yes.
Are you using a mid drive or a rear hub?
It's a rear hub.
Rear hub.
Yeah, I've got the Rad Rover. I forget which number.
All right. Is it a fat tire?
Yeah.
Hey, that does pretty well on the sand, then I would imagine.
Yeah, it does pretty well. I haven't really had any issues with it. I try to keep it as dry as possible. I've got some friends who will run them through a little bit of water, but I haven't been as brave. I've also got a buddy. He carries a giant styrofoam block on the back of his e-bike, and what he'll do is he puts it up under the e-bike and straps it, and will basically float his e-bike through like deep water if he's got to cross through an area, and then get to the other side, take the block off, and put it in the back to keep it out of water.
Dude, that's a level of like commitment and intense that like I would just kind of get to that and be like, well,
bike staying here.
Just leave the bike there.
Yeah, exactly.
I would the bike all the way across it, and then get back on it on the other side.
For sure. Yeah, I would try to canoe it or wade it past that part, but then that's the sort of thing where I would think, well, I'm going to hit that, so maybe just don't even get a bike, because then that's going to happen, and I'm better off just dealing with the walking. But me and Paul, we're thinking about getting some. I mainly want one for going out west, because I know, I haven't done Nebraska, but I've done South Dakota and Wyoming, and it was lots of walking, man. Lots and lots of walking.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking a bike would be really nice for that. And then we also have some areas like northern Minnesota is like huge big woods and flattish. And then central Wisconsin's kind of the same way a little bit. So we were kind of thinking getting us some e-bikes would kind of be beneficial to help us, get 3 miles into an area, hunt that spot, and get right back out.
Another reason I'm thinking about it for northern Minnesota is they got road restrictions on up there. During turkey season, they close down all the state-owned forest roads. They close them down because the frost is coming out of the ground, and the ground is all soggy and squishy, so they don't want people driving ATVs and stuff up and down, and their trucks up and down the road. So they'll put a sign saying this forest road is closed until further notice, and they'll put them all over northern Minnesota. It's great because it keeps the people out. But then if you get somebody like my dad or somebody who doesn't get around very, very well, it limits where you can go.
Yeah. That's one of my tactics too. That it's just trying to get further than someone else would be willing to go. So I'll always try and push that a little bit and just see if I can get away from people by going as deep as possible.
Sure.
Well, I know, Paul, you said that was your last question.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on his paintings is all I was doing. I seen your paintings on the on your Instagram account. They were pretty good. The couple of landscapes.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had more time.
Yeah.
Work and hunting always get in the way.
I kind of dabbled in some painting when I was younger a little bit, but like you say, I can't pull the time for it,
Yeah, I just can't find the time for it. I probably make like one painting a year, but
yeah,
I do what I can.
Right.
Is that like was that oils or like acrylics or what was
it's
that?
It's acrylic. Yeah. I think oil looks better, but I can't stand being in a room with oil paint. So I paint in acrylic.
I think you can get more detail out of an acrylic too.
Yeah, it depends, but like I said, I think I like the colors on oil better, but just for breathing and working with them, I like acrylics.
Sure.
Well, I like working with acrylics because I think they're a little easier to use. And I applaud you on that landscape stuff, because I know that landscape stuff's hard to kind of paint, because you're looking at a bush and you're just like, how do I break this bush down
Mm-hmm.
into, into a painting? Like, what do I do? It's like, do I do each and every tiny little strand of grass that's in the way or whatever? And you got to figure all that stuff out.
That's something you could get away with the acrylics a lot, but I don't think oil painting is more of kind of a blend. You step back and everything blends in and it looks, but you get up close, then you can see the smattering and stuff like that. Where the acrylics, you can get real up close to it and you can see the fine detail in it and everything. So
it's a tough balance, because like you said, it's like you can't possibly sit there and paint every leaf, right? But you also can't like just make blobs of everything all the time. So it's like
then it just looks blob. Yeah.
So you have to like find this like in between world where you've just indicated enough that your brain will do the rest.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And that was the Bob Ross hour on
there you go
podcast.
happy little trees.
Yeah.
Happy trees.
Well, cool,
right.
man. Yeah, man. Thanks a ton for coming on here and,
Absolutely.
doing this
Thanks for having
podcast
me.
with us.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Enjoyed it.
And I do want to mention it just because that's what intrigued me was we saw the old gobbler patch on your vest. That's the old gobbler form. And I know I was just watching it. Shoot, man, I think I was just eating cereal or something, just watching it in the morning. And then I was like, that's an old gobbler patch. I think I got the same one.
Yeah, I've had a whole bunch of people hit me up on Instagram like, hey, where'd you get that patch?
Oh, that's great. They got some cool patches, man. They got some cool ones. I know, Paul, you do a giveaway, don't you?
Right. I usually buy a couple every spring, but I don't use them. I ended up, because it's always a mad rush at the beginning and when he first lets them out, so everybody snatches them up right away. And then later on in the season, he's like, anybody got any old gobbler patches? So I usually got 2 or 3 or whatever sitting in my back pocket, and I'll give them away, in May or something like that to whoever wants one.
Nice.
Right.
This is it, right?
There it is. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right, man. Well, like I was saying, man, thanks a ton for doing this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Richard. Well, you have a good one, man. It was nice chatting with you.
You too.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks,
Richard.
guys.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to the Off the Roost podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram at Off the Roost Calls and Cooley Creek Custom Calls, as well as on TikTok at Off the Roost Pod. Stay tuned for future episodes, where we'll try to keep you informed on the latest in turkey hunting, and try to remember the heritage surrounding the elusive and sometimes mystical animal that is the wild turkey.